Good morning, everyone. Today's reading is on Joy and Sorrow by Khalil Gibran. Then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with tears. And how else can this be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. It is not the cup that holds your wine, the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven, and is not the lute that soothes your spirit, the very wood that was hollowed with knives. When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that has given you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again into your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say, 'Joy is greater than sorrow,' and others say, 'Nay, sorrow is the greater.' But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep on your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill in balance. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and his silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall."
Beautiful anthem. Thank you. So, according to the Christian spiritual calendar, today is the third Sunday of the Advent season leading up to Christmas, and it's typically associated with the spiritual cultivation of joy. By saying the spiritual cultivation of joy, I do mean something different from the messages we are bombarded with about joy from advertisements, which seek to create in us a desire for consumer goods that they're selling, a desire to have and to consume things. Rather, I want to follow the words of Unitarian Universalist minister Scott Alexander, who I think points us in the right direction in his introduction to a wonderful book called Everyday Spiritual Practice: Simple Pathways for Enriching Your Life, which I have purchased a copy or two for our library, which I'll add to that. In contrast to a way of living that he calls the unexamined life following Plato, which taken to an extreme is simply reacting, following routines without deliberately structuring meaning into our lives, he suggests that any activity or attitude taken with regular and intentional engagement, done to deepen the quality of our relationship with life, both within us and around us, can appropriately be called an everyday spiritual practice, especially in our Unitarian Universalist tradition, in which we encourage one another to the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, our fourth principle, because as Unitarian Universalists, we are encouraged in that pursuit to draw upon and be inspired by the full depth and breadth of sacred understandings as experienced by humanity. So let me repeat, anything that you do, perhaps are already doing, but to which you bring intentionality and regularity in order to significantly deepen the quality of your relationship with life, both within and beyond you, is an everyday spiritual practice. To deepen the quality of our relationship with life, with the miracle and blessing of embodied existence, this incredible interdependent web of being, both within and around us. So, like what? What are some examples, you might say? Running and other movement practices done with intentionality, regularity, and depth. Tai Chi, which we will begin offering here in January. Yoga, martial arts, intentionality around food and cooking. Prayer, sacred reading, time spent with an altar, meditation and mindfulness practices, and all of the contemplative traditions that inspire that. Add to that the many ways we can practice intentionality around our relationships with loved ones or with lost loved ones in the grieving process. Quilting, gardening, cooking, art, poetry, and all the creative endeavors which I have seen to be more and more important in this congregation than in others I've been a part of, as art and creativity of all kinds so often allows us to reconnect with parts of ourselves, integrate parts of ourselves, experience and become more whole. Singing and music, which perhaps belongs in the creative category as well as in the category of worship. And of course, all our endeavors connected to social justice and social service, so important to the history and life of our religious movement and this congregation. Of this last category, Unitarian Universalist Minister Barbara Wells writes, quote, "Comfort and spiritual peaks are wonderful, but spiritual practice is ultimately designed for something more, to make us better people and to bring our gifts into the world. The most important spiritual task we have as human beings is to make this planet kinder, more humane, and more just." Can I get an amen? Whatever we do with regularity, intentionality, and depth of relationship to life to assist us in this endeavor, and these endeavors, should undoubtedly be called a spiritual practice. And I'd add here, simply by virtue of being an active part of this spiritual community, day by day, modeling a way of being in the world, of being in relationship with each other and those in need, both human and non-human around us, this is absolutely our spiritual practice as Unitarian Universalists as well. But there is room for, and I would encourage you to actually choose intentionally a practice or two or three. They don't have to be the same, but on a daily basis. The late American spiritual teacher Ram Dass wrote an interesting article called "How Do You Find the Right Spiritual Practice?" He begins with this curious statement, quote, "There is a matter of timing that's important to keep in mind. We often choose a sadhana, which she called is from the Hindu tradition, a spiritual practice, a little before its time or before it chooses us, before the marriage works. And we find ourselves in this ought and should predicament where you start out with great love and within a little while it's, I've got to do my practice. And it's just another thing like washing the dishes. And so he says, start slow, relax, go gently. The intention that we bring at the beginning matters. Later on, he has this other great line. The game, he says, is to flip the sense that rather than being in the world and then pursuing a spiritual experience, to take the perspective that you're really a spiritual consciousness playing in the world. I like this idea. A spiritual being made of the same stuff as the stars, sharing that incomprehensible divine spark of consciousness, having a human embodied experience in loving relationship with ourselves and others in this world. Let's do that. He also points out you can't assume that the practice you found, when you found one, is the practice that's going to last you for the rest of your life. As many of you know, I jumped into meditation and South Asian spiritual practices with 2 feet when I was 18 years old. And I thought that was it. I was good to go, you know. Yet it became clear a decade later, and then even clearer 2 decades later, that the spiritual practice of meditation was not the end-all and be-all for me, the answer to my spiritual needs. And to be a part of a beloved spiritual community like this one, that encourages me to continue to evolve as I see fit, while remaining committed to creating a better world together, was and is more essential for me. Being a Unitarian Universalist allowed me to, and allows me to do something that was scary at first for me, which was to ungrasp little by little the way I was holding my practice of meditation, and to begin to reach out and engage in some other paths, some other spiritual practices, as I mentioned. And these days, I'm still engaged in meditation, and actually I'll be offering regular meditations this winter at a time to be determined in a poll that you can find in the weekly update. But I'm developing also a new pillar, a new practice, a way of engaging in connection with the earth. I've brought my meditation practice outside. Even during the winter, I'm bundling up, and I've created what's known as a sit spot, where I just will sit in a particular location, the same location, and moving out of my head into my senses and connection with earth. As well as some other earth-based spiritual practices that I've been pursuing for healing emotionally and spiritually, releasing to the earth and sky. These are providing me with a functional experience of union with something greater than myself, with the earth, which I think can be another way of testing whether a spiritual practice is working for you. Is it creating an experience of union that's emotionally fulfilling overall with something greater than yourself? The emotions are part of what it means to be an embodied human being, and an important part of spiritual practices. Ultimately, Ram Dass makes the point that once we get drawn in deeply to spiritual practice, however that shifts and moves around and fits together like a puzzle, all practices become the same practice. How could this be? He doesn't answer it. I might put it this way. They become the same in that they answer the question in an embodied way. How do we go about being in this world and expressing our care and respect in deep relationship with the miracle of life, both in ourselves and the world around us, moment by moment, to give of ourselves generously and find joy in this process, to bring our whole selves so that there may be soul-satisfying pleasure in the way that we live out our faith in this world. The late Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, in a discussion about spiritual practice, famously said, "The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now. It is not a matter of faith, it is a matter of practice." End quote. So, friends, I invite you to think about those activities in which you're already engaged, to which you might be able to perhaps bring a little more intentionality and regularity and depth. And I invite you to avail yourself of the many programs that we're offering here at UUCGL and beyond our walls, of course, as well. Spiritual practices help us tap into the blessedness of embodied, incarnate existence and to recover our joy that is so easily covered over in the grind of modern life. All too easy to forget. It doesn't have to be the same practice every day, and we can change our practices over time. That is one of the freedoms that our faith tradition offers. So long as we commit to our own spiritual development, to finding truth and meaning. Finally, let us find the heart of spiritual practice in all that we are already doing as part of this community and beyond, and find joy there, to engage life with compassion and love on a deep level, and bring our whole embodied being to the tasks that sustain us and give this life meaning as we live out our faith in this world. Amen.